Hey, I should start looking at the name before I start the video, because then hello? Leanne. I think what you're referring to is the Liberals getting back in Canada, which is obviously a crock of shit. But what can you do when they bring over so many hundreds of thousands of people that they basically solidify their own army of voters? What can you do when you're outnumbered? And it's not, I'm not even going to get into that whole issue. I have no problem helping people out. But when it's for the purpose, for a hidden purpose of your own agenda to ensure that you continue your power, you continue your reign, it ain't right. But anyways, Canada, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that this is about the Liberals winning. And no Canadian I've ever spoken to wants the Liberals to win, which is quite interesting as well. But here's the thing is, it doesn't matter. It simply does not matter. You know, I was talking with a gentleman at my work yesterday, and he was quite flustered about the fact that I wasn't voting. And quite frankly, he told me he was scared about the Liberals winning. And I don't blame him. But at the same time, that right there, that fear, that worry that you need to vote, that is exactly the trap. Because if you're really to consider how we break free from all of this stuff, you must come to realize that any government is not necessary whatsoever. Because every single one of us is capable of our own survival. Maybe, like, obviously, you know, if you were just planted in the bush right now, I'm sure that most of us would die because we're so far away from the original teachings of our planet, of our true mother. But regardless, any one of us can learn this information. Any one of us can get dropped in a bush and survive. This is to say that each person is capable of their own self-governing. And as you ascend through, and just for the purpose of the example, I know this isn't how I actually look at it, but say for the sake of the example, there are levels of consciousness that you can basically like climb a ladder so that you have a greater perception of reality. The more that you climb that ladder, because people like to make the argument of, well, if we don't need government and when we're self-governing, what's going to happen with the rapists and what's going to happen with the killers and all of this stuff? Well, here's the thing, my friend, is there are so many factors coming into play in this. With this, is it true or is it not true that every single one of us is breathing air right now? Is it true or is it not true that the space in between the trees, that the space in between you and me right now, that the space in between you and your phone right now is a constant, just like there is air, which is what you might perceive space to be, but obviously there are places where there is no air and there's still space. But like, just for the sake of this example, we can clearly see that within the space between everything that exists, is first of all the only way that anything can exist, because if there was no space, it would just be a singular point of complete solidness, and nothing would be able to grow or nothing would be able to happen. Anyways, we have this space in which all of us are inhabiting. It's almost as if we are in a sea. We are in the body of water on the planet. And, you know, if we're all breathing this space, if we're all breathing this air, if we're all occupying this same field of space that connects everything together so that everything can exist, well, then it's quite easy to realize that we're really all just one giant organism. We're really all living in the same spot. We're like, it's just so easy to see that we don't have to be afraid of each other. my mind, oh man, sometimes I start going off on concepts that are so deep that I forget where I was originally going with this. I was talking about people with, what happens to the killers if there's no government? What happens if it's all blah, 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 blah. Well, what happens when people become aware of themselves as you ascend the higher levels of consciousness, you realize that we are all one, is what I'm getting to. And when you realize that we are all one, the only way that that is possible is if you come to the realization that love is what gives life to every single thing that exists. There is a fundamental underlying energy of unconditional love that creates all of this. And it's the only way that anything can exist. And the more you awaken to the truth of what reality is, the more you awaken to the truth that is within yourself, because you are the universe experiencing itself. When you awaken to this and you live this way, you'll pick up the piece of garbage that you see on your road. You don't need to delegate the responsibility to somebody else because you have more important things to do than to take care of this living organism that is the only reason that you have a home in the first place. That's not important to you. Like let's think about these things. But the more and more you ascend this ladder of consciousness, the greater your love, the greater your capacity for love becomes. And you will never treat people wrong in that sense as well. You won't ever in your life have the thought of raping someone. For one thing, you wouldn't have the thought of killing somebody for money or any of this stuff. It would all just naturally fade away because we have reached such a place. And this is the contrast, is there's really two energies that you can exist in at all times. And it's the energy of fear, which is an energy that relates itself to many different emotions, such as anger, such as sadness, such as madness, such as apathy. It's really all just fear. And then there's love, which you can relate to happiness, joy, bliss, empathy, so on and so forth. And so long as we remain stuck in this energy of fear, we can never reach the next level of the game. We can never go higher on the ladder, because in order to go higher on the ladder, you need to realize love. So if we're walking around and we're afraid of the liberals, well, then you've just given them your power. You don't understand that you and me, Leanne Miller, that we can create a connection between you and me, and we can begin to plan things and bring our thoughts into this world, just as everything that we have ever created as a humanity has been brought into this world. It was first an idea. And this is why I make this content, is to plant the seed that we can live differently, that we can all come together, that we can all pool our resources, that we can all buy land together. And where people might be afraid of trust, where people might be afraid of love, where people might be afraid of these things, we can work through it together and make a commitment. A sacred commitment to one another, to make it happen, not even for us, but for my daughter, and for her daughter, and kids, and your kids, your grandkids, so on and so forth. Like, we can change the world. We don't have to be afraid of what's going to happen in Canada, because we have the power to change it. We have the power to create whatever reality that we want. So do we give it to them? Or do we utilize it and change the world?